The United States is on the verge of economic destruction. Kamala Harris has proposed an economic plan, much like you could read about in Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand, where the government will have total control economically over pricing of goods and services, in particular in the food industry. And as I said the other day, I have experience, because as a young boy who was the son of an individual who owned the meatpacking plant, my dad, along with my grandfather and uncle. Richard Nixon, through Alan Greenspan, had put price controls on where my dad could not sell pork other than if it was set at a fixed price, yet at the same time he was forced to buy hogs at a price that fluctuated based on the market. It drove my dad out of business, along with my grandfather and uncle. It went under. And all they could do was to sell their plant for the value of the physical assets, which was nothing compared to what the case was, because my family's meatpacking plant, pork, believe it or not, was the biggest independent pork packing plant on the East Coast. They killed about 5,000 hogs a day. I worked there as a young boy. In fact, in my book, War is Why and How I Came to Fight the Establishment, I called myself a teenage butcher. You've heard of a teenage vampire? I was a teenage butcher. But you can't really laugh about this, because what Kamala Harris is proposing to do is to be able to get into the underwear of all companies and actually analyze how they price a product and have the government control what that price will be. And what will happen is these companies will go out of business, just like my father, grandfather, and uncle's meatpacking plant did. It'll drive them into bankruptcy. And what happens then? There's insufficient food for the people. And then, of course, markets will develop overseas where there aren't these price controls. Just like happened in a somewhat analogous situation when President Jimmy Carter, one of our worst presidents, I might add, whereas Biden is worse than even that, when he put a grain embargo on the Soviet Union when it invaded Afghanistan many years ago, what happened? US grain became non-competitive, and the Europeans and Russia, as it's called today, developed a grain industry, now competing with the United States. These things don't work, but it would be the first step to take government control over everything in our lives, whether it's who we associate with, whether we have the right to excel based on our ability rather than to dumb everything down where everybody is treated the same. Again, Atlas Shrugged, where there's no individual initiative, where you can't talk about that even, where there's a truth commission, as in George Orwell's book, 1984. This is truly frightening, and it's scary. So whether you like Donald Trump or whether you like Kamala Harris, regardless who you may decide to vote for, and you can probably figure out who I vote for, but I don't advocate to anyone who to vote for. The fact is, this country's headed over a cliff. The economy's bad enough today, but if these ideas go into effect, we'll become not just like the Soviet Union was, or Venezuela, or Cuba, or North Korea, and all of these failed economies. We will become even worse than that. And without an economy that functions, and without a free market, and without the prosperous nature of the United States, which props up the world, whether it's defending through monies to NATO or the European Union, however it goes through in terms of things that we do to try to help our European allies or those around the world, we won't even have the money to help other countries, notwithstanding the fact that we spend too much money doing that and don't take care of our own problems at home. That's my message for today. Freedom Watch is going to get to the bottom of this. We're going to oppose this. Freedom Watch stands for economic freedom, as well as freedom from a tyrannical and oppressive government. And in this case, you have the same thing. So go to freedomwatchusa.org, contribute to our cause, contribute also to our hard-hitting legal cases and our citizens' grand juries. We are your Justice Department, and contribute so we can finalize the plans to declare independence, to create a new government and not a new nation, to have more political parties so we have more choices. The Democrats and Republicans are basically the flip side of the same coin. Now, one you may consider, regardless of who you are, better than the other one. But the fact is that competition is important. to get the best result out of any government that may rule along with us, not over us, but rule by and for the people. So go to freedomwatchusa.org, contribute to our cause, and I urge you to go out and buy a copy of Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged. Get the audio version if you don't want to read it, or watch the 3-film trilogy, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Because in that book, there was an individual by the name of John Gall, who left with intelligentsia, with businessmen, with labor leaders, with others, basically to wait in waiting, so to speak, to come back and to form a new nation. Well, we don't have that luxury anymore. We can't wait. This country's on its knees right now. We're almost extinct at this point, not just with regard to the economy, not just with regard to our national security, but also with regard to our ethics and morality. So go to freedomwatchusa.org, contribute to our cause, join our Justice League, be part of the solution, not part of the problem, and rise up now. There is no political messiah, whether it's Donald Trump or Kamala Harris. Only the people can do it for ourselves. We must hearken back to the days leading up to 1776, July 4th, and again, take the reins of government and bring it back to the people. Forget about the politicians. Now it's up to us to get the job done. Thank you for listening to me. Remember, the Father and Son will only help us if we help ourselves. I'll be back tomorrow with another special podcast. Until then, thank you for listening to me.